And welcome to the Daily Space Weather video, folks. Today on February 6th, 2020. First of all, we see some filaments down here in the south portion. And we're going to show you a close-up of that momentarily. This is 171 angstroms for you new viewers out there. A little bit of filamentary activity still up here in the northwest where we've seen it for a couple of days. Some active regions rising here, no apparent sunspots. And we are in a state of geomagnetic unrest as we make the video. KP is at 4. We see magnetic perturbations around the world. And let's take a look at the 304 angstroms view. Here's the north. And you can see that plasma filament up there still hanging around. It is largely on the opposite side of the sun as that thing is curling around the western limb. The area I would note is this area down here in the south, and we've made sure we made a close-up of it on HelioViewer. Here's a close-up of that region, and you can see right in this area there's a plasma filament hanging out there. It doesn't show up on the synoptic map yet, and I'll let that play for a moment so you folks can see it. And here's a synoptic map, by the way. They don't have this on the map yet. Let's just hit refresh and see if it's been... Okay, there you go. There's the current synoptic map. And if you want to look this up, just look up synoptic map. It's on Solar Ham also. And let's look at some more data here, like the GOES X-ray flux, which is quite flatlined, actually. 10.7 centimeter radial flux is back up to 71 solar flux units. And there's your KP of 4, folks. As we see an increased solar wind, we forecasted it yesterday. I don't know how nobody else did. I didn't really spend a lot of time talking about it, but the coronal hole wind stream is here, and we are at geomagnetic unrest. I wouldn't expect the KP to go above 5 because of this. It wasn't a super big defined coronal hole, but it does appear to be a co-rotating region. And that has to do with the fact that as the plasma is spewed off of the solar equator, it has a tendency to spin. So that is, eastern ejections have a tendency to overtake western coronal mass ejections. So I don't know if that makes sense or not, but we can't dwell on it because we got lots more stuff to cover here. Real-time solar wind data, we see a shifting BTBZ, really all over the place, and phi angle doing the same for the past 6 hours. Current solar wind density, the highest we've seen in quite a while here, 13.35 protons per cubic centimeter. Solar wind speed still elevated at 457 kilometers a second. And this solar wind speed could go up to maybe 600 kilometers a second here, would be my guess on this one, as it's coming up awfully quickly. So expect to see the density drop off and the speed to continue to rise a bit throughout the day. Again, could see a KP of 5 here. Mild geomagnetic storm conditions could happen. There's the ACE spacecraft, and we're going to look at all 3 magnetosphere movies this time as we see significant magnetic effects from this solar wind. Let me make sure I have that. That's the velocity, the top pane there. I would note low velocity is shown in dark red and high velocity is shown in blues. And I'll just let that play through. That is 4 hours of data. We're going to look at the density and the pressure. And we're going to look at the magnetic perturbations both at the poles and at the equatorial view. So anyway, there's 4 hours of data on the velocity, and that's magnetohydrodynamic velocity. There's the density, and you see a very, very high density regions in the bow shock area, as well as halfway around the planet there. So we see a very dense plasma sphere happening right now. And lots of induced current as a result. In fact, we're going to look at the geoelectric. We're going to see if we see any induction on the US power grid in a minute. Also, here's the pressure, and you can see very high pressure. And that's the kind of thing you see with the KP of 4, and since that refreshed, we'll let that go all the way through again. We'll let the whole entire thing play. And hey, you never know. You could see some power outages today in third world countries and so on that don't have this that don't have enough technology to know when to shut their grids down. And here's the polar view for delta B. Changes in the Earth's B field, the field that goes through the magnet, this magnet being the Earth. And again, 4 hours of data here. Just looking to see if we see any significant separation between the two North Poles or any oddities in the South Pole. We're also going to look at the equatorial view, and there's 4 hours of that also. So you see global scale magnetic pulsations happening there as a result of that, well, induced current, let's say. Let's just say magnetism, shall we? Here's the Earth, here's the U.S. power grid, and does not seem to be playing. Yeah, it's not playing, but we've left links to it below the video anyway if you want to monitor this yourself. Could give you some indication. Keep in mind this is an experimental project yet, I believe. Don't quote me on it. Next we'll look at electron flux, and there are your greater than 2 mega electron volt electron flux. That's electron density being measured there, folks. And we see a precipitous dip in the electron flux here, and that's a result of the coronal hole wind stream. Once the coronal hole wind stream peters out, we'll see this get into alert threshold territory. I'm fairly sure of it this time, although it does depend on what activity rises on the sun. And there's the GOES 14 and 15, showing you also the greater than or equal to 0.8 mega electron volt flux. Next we'll look at the ionosphere. That's 6 hours of data. And we do see charge-up anomalies once again off the west coast of South America at nighttime. And I'll bring up the latest image here to show you what the current situation is. It's 9:30 UT, the latest image. Next we'll look at the GOES magnetometers, and its continued spikiness was forecasted yesterday and the day before on this channel. And here's the Gong 2 data. This is derived from about 51 Earth-based magnetometers, as well as one out here on stereo A and one out here on stereo B. That stands for ahead and behind, by the way, folks, because they're seeing solar weather ahead of us and behind us. And we expect to continue to be in the South Pole-oriented current sheet shown here in red for an extended period of a couple of days, and continued spikiness in the GOES magnetometer, as we see a few different plumes of plasma out there in the corona. We did see a 6+ magnitude quake happen in Indonesia, and it's not good news for Indonesia as it was at depth. So shout out to Indonesia and that whole area around there. Heads up for a larger possible quake at the surface. Check out the extreme depth, 589 plus kilometers. That one came in at 1,800 and something last night. Let's scroll up the list here to see if we see any other oddities. I see some quakes hit Hawaii again, and we're looking at quake depths here. Basically a lull in earthquakes for the most part, except for that 6. And we'll get to it in a minute. Just scrolling up the list. There you go. It's a 6.2 magnitude at 589.6 kilometers depth. If that happened at the surface, that would be nearly an 8 magnitude quake, folks. That's the kind of tsunami material that kills people. If you're in anywhere around that region, please be prepared for a larger quake at the surface. And please have a disaster plan. Know which buildings might crumble. Know where the ocean will rise to massive heights and where you can escape to higher ground, for instance. Because you don't have very much time once a tsunami kicks off, especially if it's that close to land. And just scrolling the list, here's a deep quake at the northern Mariana Islands. Here's a quake 100 meters above sea level at Volcano, Hawaii, which is kind of near Kilauea. That's the name of a town, not literally referencing a volcano. They decided to name the town Volcano. Great idea. And let's look at the pressure maps for all of you legit earthquake forecasters out there. And we're going to let that play through until about 12 Universal Time tomorrow. On February 7th, the first launch window for European Space Agency's Orbiter 2, Solar Orbiter mission. It's going to be super exciting as it studies the solar polar fields and the solar pole's behavior. And we see all kinds of new cosmology happening as a result. Check out that low pressure over Greenland. It's very anomalous, as it has an anticyclonic area of dry air just mixed into it there. Anyway, let's look at some more data, like what volcanoes have been erupting. And first we've got Mount Aso exploding, producing a 6,000-foot ash plume. Sakurajima, 8,000-foot ash plume. Tal has been emitting sulfur dioxide, folks. Not a good sign. Don't pitch a tent on the lower slopes of Tal. It might poison you. Kadavar, that's new on the list, folks. Exploding, producing a 7,000-foot plume. Mount Ibu, back on the list. Apparently produced a 5,000 to 7,000-foot plume there. Krakatau back on the list. Eruption reported by seismogram. Tucono, continuous emissions there, flight level 7,000. Popocatépetl, exploding, flight level 20,000. Fuego, exploding, flight level 15,000. Nevado del Ruiz, exploding, flight level 19,000. Sangay exploding, flight level 22,000. Reventador exploding, flight level 18,000. Sabancaya exploding, flight level 24,000. Please don't fly a hang glider over any of those places. That is a significant volcanic uptick. Let's talk about coronavirus real briefly. We've updated the smashomash.com/forum once again. So check that out. It's a massive repository with all kinds of different points of view and so on. And we're going to get to the real-time information about it. I'm just suggesting that you head to smashomash.org. Scroll down, click on the newly unveiled forum. It's smashomash.com/forum. And one thing I would note, folks, is that this has to be underreported, as there are millions and millions of people who are quarantined. It's impossible to confirm a case when somebody is quarantined. If you're quarantined, you can't go to the hospital, and hence you can't be confirmed. It's not super easy to confirm a case of a virus, as it has to be specifically identified by its DNA, I imagine. So, not easy to get a real number. And the most dangerous thing about coronavirus is the following. It has possibly up to a 2-week period before symptoms are shown. And that's the problem. That's what made it so easy to spread at the beginning. And let's just look at the data here. Here's the current graph of cases both in China and not in China. And that's actually a good sign there, folks, because we don't see many cases outside of China. Let me just reload that and make sure that's the most up-to-date information, and it looks like it is. So, pushing 30,000 confirmed cases and 565 confirmed deaths, almost entirely in China. One in the Philippines and one in Hong Kong. So let's check lightning maps and see what's going on, if it's causing any disasters. And it looks like Mississippi once again, as well as Alabama. Let's see what's going on in lightningmaps.org. Lake Purdy. I think there's going to be some pretty loud thunder rolling in. Next time you hear thunder, Birmingham, shout out to Birmingham. Holla. Here's the rest of the world view. So some significant storms hitting the U.S. there. There is the U.S. Doppler radar map. I'll move that up so you can see the time and date stamps. Some ice striking north central PA. And I think we will be good where I'm at today. Here's the water vapor map. And check out that swirling system over Oklahoma there. A swirling mass of counterclockwise rotating dry air being held in place by a low pressure system. As those things usually rotate clockwise. And there's a close-up of that region there. It's a swirling Birkeland current. Oh my gosh, it's a Birkeland current. I can see things that aren't there. A bunch of massive air there, a bunch of dry massive air swirling about. And it's causing some compression downwind from it. And that's part of what's causing those storms to kick off, folks. It's all about that pressure gradient. As dry air controls the atmosphere. Should be some interesting cloud patterns there over northwest Texas today. And there's the water vapor map over Europe and Africa. That's just for you, Papa Giorgio, just for you, or whatever your name is now. Quit changing your name. Anyway, there's the water vapor for those areas. And I have no idea what time it is. I'm not adept at using this data yet, so bear with me. Next, we'll look at the jet streams on the global scale. There is the eastern world. And you can see some equatorial air moving east to west, which is the abnormal direction. And here is the west. And you see, once again, 180-degree bends in the jet stream and doubled up jet streams. Yesterday over the North Atlantic, we saw a quadrupled up jet stream. Perhaps watch yesterday's video if you didn't see it. Thanks, Smash Team, for tuning in. Stay tuned for bonus features. But first, please take a moment to press like and subscribe on YouTube if you enjoy the content. We've got hundreds of videos about space weather, cosmology, even things like movie reviews, and growing indoor tomatoes. That's just a blurb. Do you follow us on other social media like minds.com/smashomash? And on BitChute, as we just put up an exclusive video this morning. If you're viewing these videos on YouTube, our video yesterday titled Iowa Caucus, Cringeworthy Shadow Government, Scams, Waste, Fraud, and Abuse was demonetized on YouTube. So please leave a comment and let us know what your favorite place to watch the videos is, as we are migrating some content out of YouTube. So anyway, there's an exclusive that went up today. Here's a tidbit. Only use it for good and not for evil, nefarious, evil purposes like misleading the shareholders. Anyway, if you're not on BitChute, perhaps go in there. And if you're not a patron, please consider becoming one, as we are expanding our operation into all kinds of different things. In 2020, it's going to be a crazy year. Get in on the ground floor and help to support our organization, as there is way too much stuff to do to explain in this video. And we've got, count 'em, one additional bonus feature here. Looking at a bunch of coronal holes in the north portion of the solar disk there, moving into the Earth-facing area. Couple active regions rising there. It's 193 angstroms. It's 48 hours worth. We are out. Thanks for tuning in. Remember, stare at the sun. And when you do, use the proper instruments like a solar filter or perhaps the SDO, and don't drink. And if you do drink, certainly don't drive. And since it'll never be now again, may that solar wind be at your back and that atherosclerosis absent from your veins.